In the beginning there was the Bongcloud, and the Bongcloud was with Chucky, and Chucky was the Bongcloud. This is the original Bongcloud. So Vasyl Ivanchuk kicks off with pawn to e4, Badr Jabava goes in for the Caro-Kann defence, and we have this variation on the board which is known as the fantasy variation, pawn to f3. Looks kind of crazy because you're immediately weakening your king, but what white's trying to do is set up a big centre here and claim an advantage. Now the main way for black to play here is with pawn to e6, knight to c3 and bishop to b4. But what Jabava does here is go queen to b6 immediately, so he's flaunting opening principles, bringing his queen out before minor pieces, and now Chucky plays this wild looking move, pawn to a3, a novelty in the position, and again breaking opening principles, the fourth pawn move here, and in response we have another pawn move, pawn to e5. And this whole sequence of play and the position on the board, it really reminds me of the invention of rugby. There's a famous story about a young boy called William Webb Ellis, and it goes that he picked up the football, or the soccer ball as it's known globally, and began to run with it with a fine disregard for the rules, as the saying goes, and that was how rugby was invented at Rugby Private School in England. And I look at this position here, both super GMs are just playing with this fine disregard for the rules, really exciting stuff on the board already. So what's Jabava trying to do? Well, he's trying to break down these dark squares. So if you take that one on e5, then bishop c5 is already very strong. You're threatening the check here. You're also lining up this battery to win the knight. It's not good for white. So what Chucky does here is take on d5. Now it's not the best move. Once again, he's making his fifth pawn move. He should develop a piece. But now the best way for black to respond is actually just capturing that pawn back. And you're doing quite well. The knight can come to c6, for example. But what Jabava does here is go knight to f6. So both players are just going for it here, developing pieces now finally. What's going on? Well, Chucky now plays another aggressive move. He takes on e5. In for a penny, in for a pound, as we say in England. Now he's attacking the knight here, and Jabava gets very aggressive now. His best move would have been simply takes on d5. Equal chances for both players, crazy position. Black's a pawn down, but has some compensation and initiative. But what Jabava does here is go bishop c5. Same idea lining up the battery, but this time he's giving a whole knight, so he has to generate an attack here. Now he doesn't decide to win this piece on g1, so he first checks. We have king to e2. Note that you can't step to d2 here or you get mated with the queen on e3. And now if you win this piece, this isn't a good move because white can actually take after the queen recaptures, although black is an exchange up, after bishop e3 takes on h2 and then takes on g7 here, white is doing well, has an initiative, bishop pair, and also has two pawns for that exchange. White has significant advantage here. So this wouldn't have been good. Jabava recognised that. So he forces this king up to e2, that classic Bongcloud move. Normally that's e4, e5, king e2, but this is the original Bongcloud for me. So that king steps up the board, and now he castles the king. So obviously his intentions are clear. Let's rapidly bring the rook to the e-file, check the king, blow Chucky off the board. Now, can you find the move that Chucky played here? There's only one move to not get absolutely smashed right now. And if you're enjoying this video, do hit that like button, let me know, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already to never miss a future video. So here, the best move in the position is queen d2. Now this is critical because after check on e8, the king now finds a square on d1, which the queen just vacated. But what black can do now is check on the back rank, and this is what was played. I mean, look at this crazy position. You don't see this every day. So the queen captures here, the bishop takes, king takes back, and we have a very imbalanced position already with these two minor pieces, rook and two pawns for the queen. So white has greater material here, but has to unravel. And Jabava understands that he needs to generate an initiative now. So he goes bishop f5. hitting this pawn, not taking here, instead developing pieces, and Chucky does the same with bishop e2. He wants to start unravelling. So he's giving this pawn if Jabava wants it, then he'd go knight c3. The game would go a slightly different direction, this was possible, but Jabava wants to stick with this principle of developing rapidly, so he goes knight to d7. And now that that knight has developed, Chucky snatches on c6 here. The knight can't come there anymore, that would have been good, so the pawn recaptures here. That is the best move. Although you split the pawns, it's a bit more dynamic. You cover these squares here from any knight when it comes to c3 coming in, and possibly this one can use that square as an outpost later on too. So Chucky now goes bishop d1. He covers this pawn, yes, but more importantly, he gives this knight a square here. So rook e8 check came, the knight came to e2, this one took on f6. Chucky could have flicked in this takes on g7 at any moment, by the way, but as mentioned before, he's trying to get pieces out and unravel, not pick up material. Now he gets knight c3 in, and here it's really tricky for Jabava, because he wants to intensify the pressure against the king, but he's kind of running out of pieces to do it. I mean, knight d5 is the main move that the computer wants to play. Jabava goes for bishop to c8 here. Might look passive, but he's trying to reroute it round to this diagonal, intensify the pressure on e2. And Chucky now plays an excellent move of pawn to a4. So he wants to lift this rook into the game like this. We had a5 from Jabava. He doesn't want that pawn coming to a5 from white. Now rook f1 played, so that after bishop a6, Chucky can go rook f2, lending some overprotection to that e2 square. And once again, Jabava has to try and intensify the pressure, so he goes pawn h5 here. So he's running this h-pawn down, trying to induce weaknesses. Rook a3 from Chucky, pawn h4, and now an excellent move responding to that threat. Do you go h3? Well, that wouldn't be good. Then you start weakening these dark squares. Do you leave the pawn to come down on its own? Well, Chucky goes pawn g3, a nice response. Does black want to take, push on? Jabava decides to push on, create this thorn pawn. Maybe that can help attack the king later, but now Chucky goes g4. So at the right moment, he might be pushing g5, kicking this knight away, and it also just gains some space for him. Obviously, his position is quite cramped here. So for example, if his knight ever comes to e4, well, now it can't be kicked with f5 so easily. So g5 might be coming. The knight wants to come to d5. So rook d8 was played, maybe lending some support to this square. Maybe queen d4 and an attack down here is coming. So this knight now came to f4, covers more of this d5 square. And now it's tricky for Jabava. He goes knight d7 here. He's looking to come perhaps to e5 and c4, but it's not easy to get through to the king now. So now Chucky goes rook to b3. He centralises the queen, yes, but now he plays an excellent backwards retreating move, always difficult to spot. He goes knight f to e2, and it might look weird when he's just moved that one out from the square, but what he wants to do is kick this queen off the d file or move the rook off the d file, which is what Jabava did to pin the knight, because now there's no more pressure against the d1 square. This c3 knight is free to move without tactics against this undefended bishop. Really nice prophylaxis from Chucky. So knight e4 played. It does give this pawn on a4. Jabava jumped in and took it. But now bishop d2 comes. It's looking at that a5 pawn. Rook a3 is coming. Now the best move here was actually queen to a2, so that after bishop c3, the rook coming to a3, the queen can wriggle out to this d5 square, let's say. But after the queen came to a1, bishop c3, now it's really tough for black because that queen is getting boxed in. So knight e5 was played, rook a3 from Chucky, the queen came to b1, and now another excellent retreating knight move, knight to d2. Not only hits the queen, but overprotects this f3 pawn as well. And it's so tough for black now. Jabava's running out of moves, the clock's ticking down, the rook captured here on a5, and this is actually busted for black. Two pieces are attacked here. I mean, let's say with this bishop you try and chop on e2, for example. Well, then the rook simply recaptures here, and now there's a pin against the knight. You can't actually move it. If you try f6, then we've got f4. Really bad for black. So what Jabava did here, after rook takes on a5, he actually just retreated this knight. This allowed Chucky to pick up here, and now knight f4 was his last roll of the dice. But can you pause and find the absolute killer move in the position? Best move, leaves white with about a +15 advantage. Awesome stuff from Chucky. He goes rook to a8 here. A beautiful decoying move, because this rook is pinning the knight, which is attacking the queen. So if you take the rook, we pick up the queen here, and there's really barely anything else in the position. If you try this knight g2 check move, well, then we can actually take with the rook here, the pawn recaptures, and now we pick up here with check. King moves away. Now the rook can come back to a8. This knight still covers the queening square, and soon we're just going to go pawn b3, rook a1, supported by the bishop, checkmate the queen. It's game over for black. So what an awesome game from Chucky, the original Bongcloud. If you want to see my Vasyl Ivanchuk playlist, click here. Thanks for watching. See you soon.